Carolina did eclipse the 80-point mark, and they went on to improve to 4-0, 87-58, the final score against Radford. And so Derek was picking on Casey a little bit because that's been 55 years since that happened. But I'll tell you what, man. This team I mentioned last week when I think Derek was on, and I mentioned I felt like watching Lamont. He's having as much fun coaching the game of basketball as I've seen him have here at South Carolina since he's been here at South Carolina, because he's got a bunch of guys who are capable of doing the things that he likes to do. Now, if you go back to game one, we pointed out the shot making ability for multiple players on the floor. The assist ratio was high. The energy, the young freshman, like all the positives. And then we pointed out the negatives. You're going to have to figure out how to rebound. You're going to have to score points in the paint. You're going to have to play transition defense. You're going to have to move the ball and play transition offense. These are just little things that they're going to need to continue to work on. And then, of course, they had the Southern Miss game. They had to have a couple big shots from Michi and some other nice plays there at the end to kind of scratch that thing out. And then you had the Presbyterian game, and it felt like you saw a focus on, okay, they're focusing on some of these things. Like, let's try to get the ball in the paint. Let's see what we can do. And then you had last night's game. And look, I'm not going to – this isn't an effort to build up Radford into being some great team, although I actually like that team. I think they just haven't figured out how to glue together yet, but they've got a bunch of talent.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of run them down the floor, just kind of fire it off and do whatever they want. There's not a whole lot of cohesion offensively with what Radford is doing right now, but there's a bunch of talent over there, and I didn't realize going into the game.
They just hung with North Carolina last week.
They lost
and gave them quite a run. They ended up losing by 14, but they were well in that game for most of the basketball game. So to your point, there's a lot of talent.
Yeah, they had some SEC guys that transferred there. I think a kid left NC State or something like that and went to Radford. So there's a bunch of guys. So then, as the game is unfolding, we're realizing, okay, Carolina is shooting it from long range, but they're not shooting it well from long range. And that was no problem.
Yep.
South Carolina was 34 of 59 from the floor, but just 7 of 25 from long range, which means that they were 27 of 34 from inside the three-point line. And they were almost flawless in the paint. And they rebounded at an incredibly high level. They out-rebounded Radford by 14 boards, dude. 14 boards.
Yep.
More. And you saw guys down there not only giving great effort, Rob, but you saw guys down there who you could tell. I forget about the competition. I'm watching what these guys are doing. Are they in position to make a rebound? Are they having to go over the back and they're fouling because of it? What are they doing with the basketball once it gets into their hands? Do they know what to do with the basketball? Are they moving the basketball? Are they getting the ball up the floor? All those things. And I'll be honest with you, the guy who through the first 3 games was most impressive at rebounding the basketball, being in position, was Eli Ellis. And then last night you saw Simeon, you saw Strong, even Asandiko, who got in there and did some good things down low. Jordan Butler did some. You're continuing to see like these little pockets of improvement in the things that we all saw after game one and said, well, that's going to need to get better. Now, they're going to turn up the heat on the competition a little bit this weekend. You got Butler coming up on Friday. I think it's a 2:00 tip on Friday. And you got Northwestern on Sunday. So that's good. Those 2 teams are better than the teams that they've played. And we'll see how much carryover there is. But you got to like what you saw from those guys last night, not to mention the fact that they had 22 assists on 34 made field goals. That's a really, really, really strong number.
Yeah, I think, excuse me, overall, that the the makeup of how they played the game last night looked different to me. I was encouraged that they only shot 25 3-pointers, which is a weird thing to say. But you said here last week with me, and I agree with you that we could probably expect them to shoot 30. Like that seems to be like a number that they like. They have shooters. They definitely want to get those shots up. But it was obvious that they are trying to get into the paint, but also when they recognized they were cold, they did try to work the ball in a little bit more. They weren't so stubborn. I've said the phrase "live by the three, die by the three" multiple times. They weren't so stubborn to just continue to force it. There's something to be said for continuing to get your shot up and trusting your shot. And if I'm cold and I'm a shooter, then it's going to come back around. But there's also something to be said for recognizing the matchups and a mismatch down low. And this was obviously the Elijah Strong game. It was kind of his coming out party. He leads the team with 15 points. He was 7 for 10 from the field, and he was 50%, took a couple of threes and knocked one down as well. Mike Sharp-Johnson leads the team in rebounds with 10, and I really love his ability to, like, that 1 through 4 for him is just so fluid, and he can just kind of fall into line anywhere, and has a knack for the basketball. He's going to grab it, and he just makes smart plays. This team is, in a lot of ways, I think we've talked about them looking more like a Lamont Paris basketball team, but I'll tell you this: as you look at it yesterday, nobody took more than 10 shots.
Yeah.
And the leading scorer had 15 points, yet the team scored 87.
Mm-hmm.
So and Meechie Johnson is 1 for 5 with 2 points in the game, and that's who people would look to is probably going to be the top scorer on the team this year. The way that they spread the basketball around is just really encouraging to me. Again, I don't want to boost Radford up more than what they should be, but to kind of hold them at bay and to take off in the way this offense did, I think it's encouraging to a lot of people to have them see this team kind of take care of business the way that they're expected to take care of business. And if you know what you're looking at from a basketball standpoint, you can tell that Lamont Paris is working some things out and discovering some things about some guys and certain matchups that he likes. Who can he put in certain situations? We're seeing increasing minutes for Grant Polk. That's going to continue to come on. Derek told us that here last week. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see how it continues to develop. It's really fun to watch Lamont Paris tinkering and kind of playing with how this is going to work out. And you don't need guys like Meechie to just go out and shoot the lights out every night, which is a good thing because we love Meechie, and I think that he is going to score a lot of points, but he can be a little bit of a streaky shooter, right? We've seen that over the course of his career. So when he has nights like that, who else can you lean on? Apparently the whole rest of the team, because they were able to spread it out and score the basketball pretty well.
Yeah, they'll definitely obviously whittle the minutes down. There's no question about that. 50 points came off of the bench last night, led by Elijah Strong, who had one of the more impressive interviews I've heard in quite some time post-game with Derek Scott courtside. He is incredibly well-spoken, and you can hear a lot of Lamont Paris and actually what he says. Now I understand much more why he's on the basketball team. I mean, he's a guy who has some resemblance of what they had from B.J. Mack just a couple of years ago, although he's a little bit more athletic than B.J. was. But last night, as you pointed out, 7 of 10, those 10 shots were from Elijah Strong, and 2 of them were from long range, and he drained one. You mentioned Grant Polk as well. Grant started the year 4 of 4, and he hit his first one last night, 5 of 5. He finished 2 of 5, so he is 6 of 9 from beyond the arc this year. True freshman sharpshooter off the bench for South Carolina. So Gamecocks did what they needed to do, blow out the Highlanders before hitting the road. They're leaving today to go to White Sulphur Springs and the Greenbrier Resort up there, and hopefully come home with a couple of more wins underneath their belt. Again, I'll maintain this, and then we'll turn the page and get back into some football here in just a second. But with the 13 non-conference games that they play, I was looking at the KenPom stuff this morning. Now, remember something on KenPom. Matt Anderson describes this way better than I do. But remember something on KenPom. When you come into the year, you got a KenPom ranking that uses metrics from like the last 3 seasons to help create that preseason KenPom number. So it's a good judge of team character, if you will, but also when you enter the year, you kind of are where you are based on what you've done. And that's not the fairest way, but there's only just so many ways that you can have a starting point, right? So, but when I looked at Ken Palm, I don't think this is going to catch anybody off guard. Butler, Northwestern, Virginia Tech, and Clemson are obviously the four teams that are going to greatly continue to help South Carolina climb the metrics ladder here in the non-conference slate of their schedule. So with those 13 that they'll play, I still think that they've got to win 11. I just think that that's such an important number for South Carolina before they get to the 18 games that they'll play in the SEC. And then you can start to really accumulate some metrics there with what else is going on in the league, because we know it's going to be another really good year in the SEC. Maybe not as strong as last year, which, quite frankly, thank God.
Last year was historic. Last year was historic.
Yeah.
I think that I've already heard the crowd coming out and saying, "Oh, well, the SEC is going to be down this year." Down compared to what? Like one of the greatest years we've ever seen in the history of college basketball from a conference. Like, of course they're going to be down. That's not a sustainable number and level of production for us to see every year, even out of whoever is the best conference. You're not going to just double up on that many teams in the tournament. Now, I think that they're going to be really, really good again, but that's just unrealistic, and it's an easy shot for people to take that don't like the SEC.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. I saw a bunch of shots on the SEC and the CFP rankings last night from people on social media. Elsewhere that happened in the SEC, there are other teams that struggle to put teams away that aren't big brands. It's not only South Carolina. This actually happens in college basketball. For those who don't believe it, it took a last-second shot for Arkansas and Coach Cal and Nick Pringle, who got into a scuffle in that ball game, but they escape Winthrop 84-83 at Bud Walton Arena. LSU over Alcorn State. Ole Miss had to struggle to get by Austin Peay at home last night in Oxford. Montana gave Texas A&M all they can handle. A&M pulls away by 5 in that one, and Texas took care of Ryder. We'll get to a little bit more basketball later on.
You missed just one in there.
The drive around the SEC. Well, Kentucky got throttled Michigan State. Yeah, I guess I probably should have let off with that. Yeah,
I don't want to miss an opportunity to point that out.
Yeah, it's that's Kentucky basketball is very resemblant of SEC football. You know, they've lost to Louisville, they've lost to Michigan State. They beat Eastern Illinois. I had to pull this up to make sure I was right. Eastern Illinois, Valpo, and Nichols, and now everybody up there is all over Mark Pope because he can't win a big game. Yep. So
they got popped in the first half. I mean, the second half was that both teams scored 39 points. It was right out the gate. They got absolutely blitzed.